Hello and welcome to New Wave Global. You're watching Unraveled and I'm your host Marvi Sirmed. First of all, my apologies for not being as regular as I should have been, but from now on, we will be. So, coming to the point, Pakistan stands once again at the edge of a constitutional disaster. In the name of reform, a new constitutional amendment, the 27th Amendment Act 2025, is being rammed through the parliament. The government says it's about improving governance, judicial efficiency, and institutional balance. But let's be honest, what this amendment really does is rewrite the social contract between the citizens and the state, hollowing out democracy, crippling judicial independence, and constitutionalizing military dominance, perhaps for generations to come. Tonight on Unraveled, we break down what this amendment actually does, who it really serves, and why Pakistan's fragile democracy may not survive it unless political parties, all of them, finally grow a spine. Let's begin with the facts, not the spin. The 27th Amendment is a sweeping constitutional overhaul. It changes everything from how judges are appointed and disciplined to how military command is structured, even how constitutional rights will be interpreted in the future. First, it creates a new apex body, the Federal Constitutional Court, or FCC. Now, this court will take over all constitutional cases, meaning the Supreme Court of Pakistan, which has historically been the final guardian of citizens' rights, will lose its original constitutional jurisdiction. Article 184, which allows the Supreme Court to take suo motu notice on fundamental rights, is gone, completely omitted. The FCC becomes the top interpreter of the Constitution. And here's the twist. Its decisions will bind the Supreme Court, but not the other way around. In plain terms, the FCC now stands above the Supreme Court. Now, in fairness, the idea of a constitutional court isn't inherently bad. Many democracies have them. In Germany, for instance, the Federal Constitutional Court hears constitutional complaints and ensures the legislature and executive both stay within constitutional limits. But the German Bundesgerichtshof and the Constitutional Court complement each other. Neither of them displaces the other's final judicial authority. Similarly, in South Africa, the Constitutional Court functions as the ultimate guardian of rights, but it grew out of a transparent constitutional design process rooted in post-apartheid consensus. Even in India, where no separate constitutional court exists, the Supreme Court performs both appellate and constitutional roles, but its powers are balanced by parliamentary oversight and a relatively vibrant civil society. So constitutional courts can work when the broader democratic culture supports independence, transparency, and accountability. Pakistan, however, has a very different history. Our judiciary has swung from periods of abject compromise under dictators, military dictators, to waves of judicial populism and overreach, especially in the last 15 or so years. From the disqualification of elected prime ministers on tenure grounds to activism that blurred the line between justice and politics. The Supreme Court of Pakistan has not always been the model of restraint. This legacy has created a real debate. Should constitutional powers be separated from a politicized Supreme Court to restore balance? That's a valid question, but the danger lies in who designs and controls the new court. In the 27th Amendment's current draft, this, which is in front of me right now, the FCC, Federal Constitutional Court, is not the product of democratic consensus or transparent reform, or so it seems. It is being created under political and military pressure, with judges appointed initially by the executive and without clear safeguards of tenure or independence. In other words, it takes a sound idea and builds it on a compromised foundations. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction remains, but it is now subordinate to FCC, the Federal Constitutional Court, and the Chief Justice of the new court will serve just 3 years, a design that practically ensures executive influence over judicial leadership cycles. So, yes, Pakistan might well need judicial reform, but not like this. Not through a model that entrenches control instead of ensuring independence. And that's where the bigger danger lies, because when judicial restructuring happens under the shadow of coercion, it doesn't fix democracy. It re engineers it to power. Serve power, not people. So let's unpack what this means for Pakistan's democracy. So this isn't about courtrooms or clauses. I'm not going to go into the details of, clause by clause analysis. It's about who holds real power in the republic. By removing the Supreme Court's constitutional jurisdiction and creating a politically influenced FCC, the amendment shifts the balance of power decisively towards the executive, and behind it, the military establishment. The principle of separation of powers, the very foundation of democracy, is gutted. The judiciary's independence is replaced by a structure that looks independent on paper, but is politically engineered in practice. Every constitutional petition, from human rights to provincial autonomy, will now pass through a court whose leadership is likely to be selected in the current political military context. The result, executive capture of constitutional interpretation. And this comes at a time when dissent is already at its weakest point in decades. Journalists are coerced or exiled, activists are silenced, civil society organizations intimidated, or worse, co-opted. This erosion of dissent has a direct cost. It weakens the quality of journalism, of lawmaking, of public debate, and of legislative scrutiny itself. When fear replaces critique, policy becomes propaganda, and democracy becomes a hollow theater. Hollow theater. A weak civil society never serves the people, it only serves power, as I said earlier. And this amendment, make no mistake, will make Pakistan's civil space even weaker. And perhaps the most alarming part of this amendment lies in its restructuring of the military command. The post of Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, a position meant to ensure inter-services balance, is abolished. In its place, the Chief of Army Staff becomes the Chief of Defense Forces, the CDF, the single constitutionally empowered head of all armed forces, the Sipah Salar. The Sipah Salar. That's right, the Army Chief is now not just the operational commander, but a constitutionally enshrined authority with power to recommend appointments to the National Strategic Command and with lifetime rank privileges and immunities. The amendment explicitly grants a five-star officer, Field Marshal to be specific, Article 248 style immunity and makes them removable only through a process equivalent to the impeachment of a president. Yes, you heard it right. Let that sink in. In a country where prime ministers have been hanged, exiled, or jailed at will, the top general will now enjoy lifetime constitutional immunity. This isn't reform. This isn't. It's the this is the codification of Praetorian rule, the formal enshrinement of the military supremacy within the constitution itself. Coming to judiciary. Judiciary fares no better under new clauses in Article 200 and 206. Any judge who refuses a transfer or declines promotion will be deemed retired. That's not reform. Again, that's again not reform. It is blackmail. It provides the executive with a new tool to reward compliant judges and penalize independent ones. Judges will now think twice before defying the establishment because dissent could cost them their career. And with the Supreme Court stripped of constitutional oversight, who will ordinary citizens turn to for justice? When enforced disappearances, censorship, or electoral manipulations occur, will the FCC, appointed under political pressure, really intervene? Let's not be naive. This amendment systematically erases the only remaining institutional checks on authoritarianism, the courts and parliament. Done and dusted. Now, this didn't go unnoticed by the civil society. However weak it is, it still exists, and a section of it is still resisting. And I feel really proud of it. Those of those sections, smaller, but they still are there. Independent civil society and democratic forces have not remained silent. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, HRCP, in a strongly worded statement called the 27th Amendment a frontal assault on the independence of judiciary and on civilian supremacy. HRCP warned that by abolishing Article 184, the state is removing a key instrument for the protection of fundamental rights. The commission, HRCP, also condemned the haste and secrecy with which the bill is being pushed through without public consultation and under what it calls extra constitutional influence. So HRCP has also urged all political parties to resist this backdoor rewriting of the Constitution, one designed not to strengthen institutions, but to fortify the power of the few at the expense of the many. And they're not alone. Bar councils, constitutional experts, and even former judges have called it a coup through legal text, a quiet transformation of Pakistan from a constitutional democracy into a controlled hybrid state. Now it's official. It is official. And they are not ashamed of it. They're not even hiding it. Now, let's talk about how this amendment is being passed. According to multiple political sources, the bill is being pushed by the military establishment itself. Parliamentarians are being told in not so subtle ways that the amendment must pass within days. Why the rush? Because it serves immediate personal and institutional interests. One, the current chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, is about to retire, and the military establishment, wants to abolish the position before they are forced to appoint a new one. They have to appoint a new one. Two, the judge, one of the judges being considered to head the new Federal Constitutional Court, reportedly someone pliant to the powers that be, is also retiring soon, hence the haste, the manipulation, the coercion. Um, Pakistan's parliament is being used once again as a rubber stamp, not for public policy, but not for reform, but for individual specific constitutional engineering. And let's be clear, this is not the first time. Every authoritarian chapter in Pakistan's history has come wrapped in legal parchment. From Ayub's basic democracies to Zia's Islamization and Eighth Amendment, blah, 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 to Musharraf's legal framework order. The 27th Amendment is the next verse in that long poem of constitutional deceit. Here's what Pakistan's lawmakers must demand clear textual answers to. One, who appoints, confirms, and removes judges of the new FCC? Are there independent mechanisms, or is it all under the Prime Minister's thumb? The draft that is in front of me, it's 25 pages draft, which is circulating. Every journalist has it. It doesn't tell me so. So maybe there is another draft. We will wait and watch. Number two, why the Supreme Court being subordinated to another court? What crisis does this solve that judicial reforms couldn't address? Number three, why must the army chief become the constitutionally enshrined chief of defense forces? And why give lifetime rank and immunities to unelected officers? Number four, what oversight does Parliament retain over defense and strategic commands? Or is it being permanently sidelined? Number five, where is the public consultation? Where are the white papers, the stakeholder hearings, the transparency constitutional amendment demands? If these questions cannot be answered, then no self-respecting parliamentarian has the moral right to vote for this bill. Political parties must understand this. If they don't resist now, they will cease to matter in Pakistan's political architecture. The red lines they must defend. Must defend. Deletion of Article 184, which removes the judiciary's power to Supreme Court's power to protect citizens' rights. Lifetime immunity and rank for five-star officer, which creates an untouchable military elite. Transfer or retire clauses for judges, which kill judicial independence. A hierarchy between FCC and Supreme Court, which breaks the chain of judicial precedent. The abolishment of Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, which concentrates all power in one service chief. This is not going to go well within the rank and file and within the all armed forces of Pakistan. And above all, the political blackmail of Parliament, being forced to amend the constitution to serve personalities, not principles. If the parties surrender yet again, they'll have no one to blame when they are discarded next. They themselves are going to be discarded, and that time is not very far, I'm afraid. Pakistan's constitution was not written to glorify generals or placate governments. It was written to protect citizens from exactly the kind of unacceptable power this amendment seeks to enshrine. But when dissent dies, when journalists are silenced, when civil society is cowed, when parliament legislates under fear, the soul of democracy withers. A weak civil society does not just hurt activism or the media, it erodes the intellect of the state itself, the capacity to think critically, to legislate wisely, and to hold power accountable. It produces a country where obedience replaces debate and where silence becomes survival. If this bill passes, Pakistan's democracy will no longer be imperfect, it will be irrelevant. Irrelevant. We will have a constitution that bows before uniforms and a parliament that legislates under duress. It is time for our politicians, every one of them, to find their courage. Because if they fail this test, they won't just lose the next election, they will lose the republic itself. This is not reform, this is not balance. This is the slow legal burial of civilian authority, civilian supremacy, and history will remember who stood up and who looked away. This is Marvi Sirmed. You're watching Unraveled, where we unpack the truth they don't want you to see. Have a good one. See you in a few days.